maybe in a scene here or there, should we pull back on this piece of dialogue or on this character doing, X, because we don't want to step on something down the road for the manga. It all has to feel like it's from canon. Even if there are changes and modifications, let's make it feel like it all exists as part of this world.
Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with the man who's accomplished the impossible. He's not only proven that the live-action anime adaptation can work, but he's done it with one of the world's most popular and some say greatest manga series of all time. His previous credits involving writing and producing for shows like X-Files, Lost, and CSI Miami. But now his most recent series that he was the showrunner for has been Netflix's most popular show around the world for more than 2 weeks. I'm speaking with, of course, One Piece Live Action's own Steven Maeda. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for you and your team's hard work. As someone who's very passionate about the series, it really warms my heart to see that more people are getting more interested in Ichiro Oda's epic and are enjoying the show because of you. Your show, enjoying the anime because of your show.
Yeah, thank you so much. That certainly was one of the things that I hoped would happen, which is, if we succeeded, that the rising tide would lift all boats and that people would be driven back to the manga and the anime, which I hope is happening because it's such wonderful storytelling.
I'd say top tier. It's kind of up there with Homer's Odyssey, in my opinion, but that might be, I might get some pitchforks for that one. But I'm going to go ahead and start with questions revolving around the live action, of course. But later in the interview, we might be diving into some One Piece anime manga spoilers. So anybody listening who's a little worried about that, there's your warning. But my very first question, you and producers have spoken at length on how everything felt like it was going to work out after Inaki was found in your search for your Luffy actor. I'm very curious, what did Inaki do during his audition that helped him stand out so much to earn the Luffy role?
Inaki was a real find for us, and our casting directors literally were scouring the earth trying to find cast, and particularly for Luffy, because he's so important. If Luffy fails as a character, I think the entire show goes down with him because he is such the central driver of everything that happens. Inaki was such a great find that I honestly don't know who we would have had as a backup that could have worked. The thing that he did, that he embodied, was this kind of relentless optimism that didn't feel grating, that didn't feel irritating, that didn't feel like he was trying to sell us something. Because a lot of the actors who read for us come from a little more sharp and cynical place, perhaps, or they came across as salesmen as opposed to someone who genuinely believed in what they were saying. And the key to Luffy and to Inyaki's performance is absolute sincerity, which works because Inaki is an absolutely sincere young man. And when he talks about his dreams, we didn't want it to feel juvenile. We didn't want it to feel like, oh yeah, okay, that's something that everybody would like to believe. He really has to buy it, and he has to get you to buy it, and he has to get those characters, very cynical characters like Zoro and Nami, to believe in what he is saying without feeling like he's selling something. So that was, I think, what came across with Inaki was just that wonderful sense of sincerity.
I've introduced the show to a few people who have kind of stayed away from One Piece because they're so daunted by its size. And yeah. Luffy just instantly sells them. So good call. But next question. Notable absences are animal-like characters like Richie the lion, and most notably Choo Choo, the dog that guarded the pet store that was very missed by fans, including me. While it's understandable...
I'll tell you a story about Choo Choo that I have not told anybody else yet, which is we had a fully broken Choo Choo story. It was slightly different than the manga story, and at the end of the day, we ended up separating out in this version of the story that we broke but never actually shot. Choo Choo, we had a scene with an arc with Choo Choo and Zoro, and it was very different. And ultimately, we decided, you know what, it's too different. We would love to have Choo Choo in, but it's more important to have Zoro be with Luffy and Nami when they are encountering Buggy, as opposed to being off on a separate side story. But love Choo Choo, and I have 3 terriers of my own, so I definitely have a soft spot for the Choo Choo story.
Thank you for sharing that. I am very interested to hear about other cuts, and that actually will go into a question I have later. But kind of going back to that, the One Piece world is filled with a lot of anthropomorphic characters that seem very challenging to adapt realistically, like a certain sentient reindeer doctor, who I've heard is your favorite One Piece character, Tony Toter Chopper.
Yep.
Wondering why, what makes Chopper your favorite character?
First off, it's just such a out there, larger than life creation of a talking reindeer who is also wants to be a doctor and can change size. It's like, who could come up with that? Only Oda-san, I think, and make it work in the context of the story. And then I just also love his backstory, and the backstories are so much a part of who these characters are, so that you understand where their pain comes from, where their anger comes from, where their goodness and their sweetness comes from sometimes. And I just love the Chopper story so much. Plus the idea that, you have all these human characters. Oh, and hey, by the way, here's a talking reindeer. And he's so damn cute too. So it's just a nice combination for me.
I totally understand that you can't reveal much about how following seasons might be adapted. I'll go
under the cone of silence. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't press you. I won't grill it to you hard on that. But I am wondering what your stance is on CG characters versus animatronic characters for, larger series. And what are some series that you think have nailed that challenge?
It's always very tough. For example, one of the things that we were dead set on was trying to do as much practically on the show as possible for budgetary purposes, because CG is very, very expensive. And also, we wanted the show to feel as grounded as possible, given that the world is so large and so wild and wacky. So it's always a challenge. CG characters are tough. The Fishmen characters, we made a very early decision not to do them as CG characters, not to make them 12 feet tall, 8 feet tall, because it just would require too much time and money to do so. So it was like, let's do these characters right, but let's do them practically as much as possible. And then if we need to, we can embellish some gill movement or something like that to make it feel a little more lived in and real. It's always a huge challenge. As far as shows that have done it well, I think the Pogo character in Umbrella Academy is a great example of a character who, I believe they had an actor who was in that physical space when they were shooting, but then they designed a CG character right over the top of him. I think that's what happened there, but that's an example of it done right, and I'm sure it's insanely expensive. Having not gone down that road yet with these characters, it's visual effects is a huge part of this show. How to apportion that visual effects money is a tough, series of discussions.
I appreciated the decisions you made on set of, the more you see, the more you linger on the ability, the more, it gets kind of tough to sell.
With the stretching power, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I completely understand why we had to, kind of cut a little bit and, just make it work. I think overall, y'all did a fantastic job of capturing the story while adapting it in a realistic world. And there's even some small improvements to the source material, like Zoro being more feared and famous in the East Blue than he seemed in the anime or manga. This might kind of lead into more spoiler conversations, but there was also that reference of what I like to call a hint of hockey, felt teased during the scene where Shanks scares off the sea beast and got his arm. Even during the scene where Luffy is able to perceive where Captain Kuro is during their final battle. Were there any other revisions to the source material that you were tempted to add that Oda could have introduced sooner in the story, like hockey or a mention of the pirate emperors?
I think that in just focusing on the first season, we didn't want to get into hockey. We knew it existed, obviously, and wanted to hint at it again. I think is absolutely right. When Shanks says "get lost" and you see the Lord of the Coast's eye contract, we had a lot of discussion about how much should something pass between them. What does that look like? To get the sense that yes, Shanks is really powerful and there's something going on there, but not to give away the farm as to what that was. The big, things that changed from the manga to the live action adaptation were things like, mostly structural changes, bringing forward Kobe and Helmeppo and Garp so that there was an actual pursuit with teeth coming after the Straw Hats, in addition to the pirate antagonists and the other folks that they meet along the way. So bringing that stuff forward was really important to being able to say, all right, when Oda-san wrote this, it was 100 chapters of a manga going on to, well over 1,000. We have to take those 100 chapters and say, how do we structure that in a way that feels like a really satisfying episode of television? And so East Blue Saga seemed like the way to do that. But let's bring forward Garp and Kobe and Helmeppo so that we can tell that story, put Kobe on a parallel path to Luffy wanting to be a Marine as opposed to wanting to be a pirate. And then also taking Arlong and pulling him forward, introducing him a little bit earlier at Baratier, not having Don Krieg come, which was an endless series of conversations, because obviously that's such a wonderful fight, and Don Krieg is a really cool character. But in that 8 episodes, wanting to emphasize the Arlong character more because it felt like we were heading toward a big showdown with him. Let's introduce him early and bring him to Baratier.
It definitely made him a little bit more menacing when he just, when he showed up and beat up Luffy off the Baratier. But I thank you so much for also getting Krieg in there. I happen to really enjoy the Hawkeye intro scene where he's just taking out pirates on a beach and stuff. It was a lot of fun. But speaking of the manga, in your previous interview with Screen Rant, you revealed that you were mostly caught up on the weekly manga. For me, when new chapters drop, it creates a level of excitement among the manga reading community that is really difficult to find elsewhere. Nami's actress, Emily Rudd, is also, and other members of your team have also revealed that they're fans of the series. While you're filming, I'm wondering, were there any events from the series' new chapters or anime episodes that you and the crew remember getting excited about and, having a good time gabbing about?
Oh, sure. I mean, we would talk about the manga quite a bit, especially if there were something, something really big. I know we had a lot of discussion when Wano ended about that arc and about Kaido. But it's stuff that is so far down the road from where we were that we had to, it's good to know what's happening, because obviously when Oda-san wrote the original 100 chapters, he may or may not have had an idea. I'm sure he didn't know everything that was going to happen 25 years down the road, but we had the benefit of knowing and being able to read that. So that allowed us to say, hey, maybe in a scene here or there, should we pull back on this piece of dialogue or on this character doing, X, because we don't want to step on something down the road for the manga. It all has to feel like it's from canon. Even if there are changes and modifications, let's make it feel like it all exists as part of this world.
And that context kind of adds a whole other layer of humor, I feel. I'm rewatching the series, and it's my wife's first time watching the series. And I think it was episode 3, Buggy is just kind of complaining about Luffy, and he's like, that dang rubber hose kid, like, oh, the rubber hose is kind of a Gear 5 sort of thing. And it might be too stretching it too far there, but it's a lot of fun.
No, I think that was actually, I can't remember if we had that scripted or if that was a Jeff Ward ad lib. But I think that one was lucky more than anything else.
Or totally on purpose. Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny. People really read into, and we knew they would too. And so we tried to make sure that we had, ample wiggle room in there, but people are reading in all sorts of things. Some of which were intended, some of which are lucky, some of which were like, really, that's interesting. And my feeling on that always is you bring your own set of preconceived notions and knowledge of the source material to the show. Enjoy it. If you see something that you think is really cool that you catch or think wonder, it's like run with that and make it your own.
As you said, Oda may have not planned every single aspect. So it's one of those happy accidents that you kind of look back and it's like, oh yeah, that does work.
Yeah.
But some of the series' most fantastical arcs, like Thriller Bark, is an absolute zombie-filled riot. Arcs with large-scale clashes like Marineford, Sport, Lord of the Rings scale fights, and Whole Cake Island, even with its twisted and Alice in Wonderland-like setting, Big Mom in general sounds impossible to adapt realistically. Are there certain One Piece species or characters that show up later in the story that give you and writers anxiety just trying to think how they could be adapted?
All of One Piece moving forward gives me anxiety, but I think that, I can't really talk about any of that right now. But I think that, yes, it's such a wonderful, fantastical world. I think that everything will be incredibly challenging.
Solid answer. All of it. I've been having a lot of fun watching the anime with my son. I am personally all caught up in all that stuff, but going back and rewatching stuff's is a lot of fun. We've recently reached the end of Alabasta, and I forgot how evil and methodical Crocodile was in that arc. I'm very curious, who to hear who your favorite villain from the One Piece manga is and why.
I have a number of favorites, but I really have a soft spot for Buggy the Clown. I think that Buggy, he starts off as sort of a minor level threat, and then obviously in the manga grows and develops and becomes one of the emperors. He's so powerful. But he also has this sense of humor and this huge chip on his shoulder. So I've always loved Buggy. I think that he's he feels that he's misunderstood, but that for me is a great character. And I was really glad we got the chance to introduce him, and then also to add a little to his character in later episodes.
Buggy Editions, I feel really nailed his character. It really kind of gave him his whole, like, he starts out scary, and then the more time you spend with him, the more you're like, all right, this guy's trying.
And Jeff Ward just brought, especially once we saw Jeff, it was like, all right, we just have to maximize screen time with him.
Absolutely. Let's see. Next question. Previous interviews, you've been asked about the possible crocodile cameo in the first Netflix episode. There's some very convincing, for those who don't know, there's a very convincing fan theory that the Alabasta villain had their gender changed thanks to a devil fruit power from the Rocky Horror Picture Show inspired character Imperio Ivankov. Do you have any favorite fan theories that you've heard, or possibly some of your own, for the final saga of One Piece's story? I've personally heard that Oda's favorite might be that Crocodile's Luffy's mom.
I have heard that fan theory as well. I think people can read into that crowd scene at Logetown, whatever they want to read into it. It's definitely, there are Easter eggs at Logetown, some very obvious and some less so. So I think people can read in whatever they like about that. The wonderful thing about a show with such a vast arsenal of storytelling and characters is there's room for, we could have made the whole show Easter eggs, because there's just so much wonderful stuff that happens down the road. The idea, though, behind everything that ended up on screen was, let's tell the most coherent story possible. Let's really make it good, make it emotional, make it exciting. And then in drips and drops, put in these Easter eggs. And let's take a look at the wanted posters and see who we can add there. Let's take a look at the Logetown crowd, and because we know who was there. And let's see who we can drop into that. Let's look at when we do signage, there's just a wealth of visual information on screen when you look at what's stenciled on a barrel. A big one that we brought along with us was having that same Gyoku barrel be that they do the barrel pledge at the end, look exactly like the one from that Luffy puts himself in when he abandons his little dinghy at the beginning. And we had hours of conversation about how the hell did that barrel get to the Going Merry, and ultimately decided, you know what, it's a little magical realism. Let's go for it. It's really fun that the barrel figures so prominently early and so prominently late. So let's just go for it.
Kind of jumping off of that, there's several live action anime projects that have been in development hell for years, like a Naruto movie, even a My Hero Academia series on Netflix. If One Piece live action does for live action anime projects what Iron Man did for superhero movies, what advice can you give future showrunners or filmmakers who want to adapt beloved series to live action?
I would say the advice that I have kind of gone by through this whole process, which would apply to, I think, to future projects, would be, number one, hire the right people to do it, which is always a crapshoot. But there's a fine line with a show, with an adaptation, and the audience base. And the audience is really different. On the one side, you have people like yourself who are hardcore fans, who know all the details, who are waiting to see the show come out and are nervous about it because there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. On the other, and so those are people who have some trepidation, but want it to be good, but are really fearful about it. On the other side, you have folks who have no idea what the project is, and somehow you have to marry those two together so that the hardcore fans are not unhappy with the experience, are having the same emotional experience, I think, as opposed to the one-to-one adaptation, which no one wants to see, I think, versus folks who are new to the show and it has to stand on its own. It can't be so inside baseball that you don't understand what's going on because it's only geared to the folks who have read the manga or seen the anime. So I would say find that balance. It's very, very tricky, but you have to find the balance between what fans who know the show expect and what fans who don't know the show are going to be entertained by.
And there's a lot of really big moments in One Piece that, it definitely works in an anime and a manga, and just putting it in real life and making it look good is a whole nother challenge. So for me, I personally wrote a Screen Rant list that I believe is One Piece's best anime fights that revealed my love for the Luffy fight at the end of Enies Lobby. The stakes, the voice acting, the score, the animation, it all works for me so well that I can get very teary easily just by thinking about it too long. But seeing Luffy hit the bell at the end of Skypiea would be another great moment. What are big triumphant moments in the manga that stick in your head the most? And what are the most excited that you're hopefully to be able to adapt?
I want to steer clear of any future adaptation stuff. There are so many wonderful moments. Yeah. And I don't want to overpromise and eventually have something that doesn't get shot. So I would just say that the world of One Piece is so huge and so wondrous that there are any number of great moments that I'm looking forward to. I just don't want to commit at this point.
Well, one that we can speak about, what are your favorite moments from season 1?
I have a number of them, and they tend to be the really emotional moments. I would say one that I knew was going to be special if we pulled it off was the young Luffy flashback where Shanks gives him the straw hat for the first time. That I knew, and we talked to our director in that case, Mark Jobst, about the possibility of shooting it kind of 1-for-1 as it was in the manga, which we did in a couple scenes. Not many, but that was one where we felt like, you know what, let's really try to set that same tableau with Shanks standing over Luffy and the hat and the tilt of the hat and all that stuff. So that was a big one. And then there were a couple that caught me by surprise, I'm pleased to say. The end of episode 8, where the sail drops on the Going Merry for the first time, and they say, and Nami tells him, we made something for you too, and you get to see that moment. And there's something about that sail dropping that when I watched it, saw it for the first time cut together, it just got me so heavily on an emotional level, because it was like, wow, Luffy's dream did come true. And look, there he is, he got the wanted poster, and now he has that ship and the sail coming down. And another moment that, again, going to the emotional moments, one of our editors, this was something that was not scripted, but again, the happy accidents that you find sometimes. One of our editors cut together a version of the Barrel Pledge at the end of the Barrel Pledge, where he dropped in the younger versions of the characters as saying their dreams. And we didn't have that originally in the script. It was just the adult characters saying their dreams, and it worked great. It was really moving and emotional. And he dropped in those kids mouthing the words that the end of each pledge and what their dream was. And I almost fell out of my chair. I was just like, this is so wonderful. We have to actually put it in the show, because wow, that it was just great. It gave me chills, and it gives me chills talking about it now. And it was just a very wonderful find.
Both those moments also got me crying. I went to film school and learned all the facets and all those things. So when a lot of things come together, it's very easy for me to cry. But both those scenes really got me. Sanji's whole scene with Zeph on the rock. I'm really glad you guys how captured the desperation of that scene, because it works really well in the anime and the live action. But after hearing me and so many other people sing so much praise, gotta ask, what do you think is something that you guys could do better on? What do you think you could have been better, and how do you think season 2 can improve on it?
A lot of things are solved by budget. And we had a healthy budget on this show. There's always room. There's always more that we wanted to do, and couldn't afford. And I have been bringing up, for example, the character of Hachi, who, boy, did I want Hachi in the show. And we had a whole fight between Hachi and Zoro set up, and couldn't do it. And that's no one's fault. It's just a matter of time and money. It would have been so time intensive and so expensive to do that. So those are things, that I hope can make it into the show at some point. The bigger ticket items like that. But as always, it's there are always budgetary concerns. that have to dovetail with creative concerns.
Absolutely. Hachi, if I remember correctly, was the octopus that had 6 swords style versus Zoro's 3 sword style.
Correct. Yeah.
And that would have been tough.
I had this whole idea of, I mean, really, I was just like, this is where my producer budget or my producer hat goes out the window. And I'm like, as a creative, as a writer, how cool would it be to have Hachi actually appear to like climb up into the roof, shoot it inside a room, and have Hachi use his tentacles to climb up and pull Zoro up and have this fight. And I had this whole idea about doing a spinning room, and it was so expensive, it was ridiculous. But it was this way to make it seem like they were fighting upside down and all that. And it's that'll be the feature version.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Are you willing to reveal some of the other big ideas that you and the writers wanted for the show that Oda turned down?
We pretty much got to tell the story we wanted to tell. It was always gradations. Would this character say this? What is this character? What is this character's affect? Is this the right thing for them to be saying, feeling, seeing at this moment in time? So it was much more subtle stuff as opposed to, hey, let's put this arc in. No, you can't put that arc in. Anything like that. It was more what Oda-san is always about is character truth, I think, and no one knows better than him. And that's something we really listen to him hard on, because we may not have always agreed, but we definitely utilized his experience and his knowledge of these characters. He created them to be able to say, wow, is that a truth for Zoro? Is that something that Nami or Sanji or Luffy would say or do, versus something that is very dramatic on its own, but is that something we want to put in that veers a little bit away from the manga? And that was always a very lively discussion.
Well, I really just have one more big question. As of the time of this interview, there's a lot of big plot threads that the One Piece manga has yet to unwind, like what the One Piece really is, the events of the Void Century that the world government has committed genocide to hide, the reunions between Luffy, Shang, Zoro, Mihawk, and Brook and Laboon. What is One Piece plot
Laboon
line
kills me. Laboon kills me. It's like we got to come back around to Laboon.
Absolutely. Well, Luffy fighting a big whale is going to be a challenge too. Yeah. But what One Piece plot line is your favorite, and are you most anxious to see resolved?
Truly, it's what is the One Piece? At the end of the day, what is the One Piece? And everybody has theories. And it's part of, I think, what makes the manga and the anime so successful, and hopefully will continue with live action. But that is a fascinating choice. At a certain point in time, there was floated the idea that we might have a conversation with Oda-san about and get a little information on that, and we chose not to do so at this point, because we want to enjoy the storytelling along with everybody else.
That is so refreshing to hear. There's actually a scene, I think later in the anime or manga, where Luffy and Usopp meet the first mate of the Pirate King, and Usopp asks him, "Hey, well, what did you see?" And Luffy hits him and says, "No, I don't want to know."
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful scene, and we felt the same way.